Welcome back to another edition of Scherable. I'm your host, Bill Scher, in a special Mother's Basement edition of Scherable. I think that we've had time to digest the election results, and perhaps this has been stated by others in other places, but I do think we need to delve in deeper into why the populist left's theory of the case was proven wrong. And I don't want to get into this to gloat. This is not to make anybody feel bad. I don't think it behooves Democrats to have the moderates do a lot of scapegoating of the left. Because to quote Jesse Jackson in his 1988 convention speech, you need two wings to fly. You need the left wing and you need the moderate wing for the Democratic Party to function. They both need to be there. So it's not about playing "I told you so" games, but we do need an after-action report. We do need to dissect what was right and what was wrong in people's theories of the case. After 2016, there was a lot of sentiment amongst the populist left and the socialist left that too much tacking to the middle was not pragmatic. You're beyond the substantive case that you weren't going to energize the progressive base. You weren't going to impress white working class voters that drifted to Trump. If you're going to play small ball, you had to be big and bold and exciting. And a lot of folks may not see me as a good messenger of this critique now that I'm known as a corporatist neoliberal vampire. But some of you out there might remember that I wrote a book in 2006 called Wait, Don't Move to Canada. And the premise of that book was that liberals need to be loud and proud. They need to embrace the L word, need to define things on their own terms and not run away from who you are, because when you do that, then the other side just defines you and you're not defining yourself, and that doesn't work. So I think that, not because of me and my book, but I do think a lot of folks on the left embraced that theory of the case and then took it several steps beyond what made sense. That's when you heard things like, well, they're going to call you a socialist anyway, so you might as well be socialist. Well, that doesn't fly. If being a socialist is a political negative, saying that you're one isn't going to pan out. You want to define yourself in a way that says, I'm not a socialist, I'm something else, be that liberal or progressive or what have you. But if the label socialist is super duper tainted, and all evidence suggests that it is, that's not going to work. And I'm still seeing resistance to this despite the results. We've had two election cycles since 2016. We had a 2018 midterm cycle where people that ran in a more moderate way were the people that claimed the House majority, were the people that flipped the Trump won districts. There are some folks like Katie Porter who won in a Romney-Clinton district and flipped the seat. But there are much more people who some who aren't around anymore, like Joe Cunningham and Kendra Horn, who flipped South Carolina 1 and Oklahoma 5. Other folks like Connor Lamb, who are still here in Pennsylvania, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, Mickey Scherable in New Jersey. These are folks that ran more moderate type campaigns and are still around. And so you're seeing folks on the left do a lot of cherry picking of data. Well, no single payer, no Democrat who rejected single payer. So excuse me if not. The Democrats who were in the House who were for single payer, they didn't lose. Those who were against single payer, those are the ones that lost. That's one of the spins that's out there. I think AOC has put that out there, and that ignores that most of the House Democrats that didn't embrace single payer, most of them did still win, and it's a good thing that they did. Otherwise, the House majority would be totally gone. There were 30 Democrats who represented Trump won districts, and at least 21 are coming back. That's not a bad record, given that Trump had a relatively good election day insofar as getting his people to show up. They showed up in Republican areas. So saying that Medicare for All is somehow a vote getter, obviously ignores things like Kara Eastman in Nebraska too, who ran well behind Joe Biden and was probably the most prominent single payer nominee in a reddish, or what was a reddish area, now more clearly purple. You see folks still defensive about defund the police, even though you have all these moderates saying this was dragging us down. In lots of places, folks saying, well, if that's your argument, then you're being racist. You're saying Black lives don't matter, and there's a huge space between you can say Black lives matter, and we still need a police force, just one that isn't racist and killing Black people. You don't have to say the police should be abolished. You don't even have to say that you need to take a large chunk out of the police budget and divert it somewhere else. I mean, I don't understand the argument for it. But what folks clearly missed, what many folks missed on the left, is a lot of people don't hate the police. Good number of people do, understandably. But when you have to win in more moderate, right-leaning areas, that's not going to be a winning argument. Even amongst people who have become more and more sympathetic to the concept of Black Lives Matter and that racism exists in these police forces. So you need to make an honest assessment over what you got wrong in your theory of the case and make adjustments if, and granted it's an if you want to be part of a successful Democratic Party coalition. Some folks might want to take their marbles and go home. Some folks might want to say, look, if I can't get Medicare for all, if I can't abolish the police inside the Democratic Party, then forget the Democratic Party. I'll go somewhere else. If that's your deep-seated view, then so be it. I'm not going to convince someone to change their view. If you're of the view that I want the Democratic Party to be as progressive as possible but still win, then you have to ask yourself, what could I do as a more progressive populist Democrat to help that cause? Just saying, taking every possible maximalist position, doing it confidently and proudly is enough to engender trust amongst more moderate, middle of the road, low information, low propensity, working class swing voters. Just being proud of your position is not sufficient. You still need to take a position that can get traction and define it well and do it confidently and proudly. But sometimes you got to cut some bait and say, you know what, cut some baggage and say, look, this is not going to fly. I mean, certainly now you got to read the writing on the wall and say, Medicare for all is not going to pass this Congress. It's not going to happen anytime soon. You've had 2 election cycles to have someone who supports single payer proudly win in a Trump won area and flip a Trump won area to argue that it has that kind of potential. And it hasn't happened. So there are other issues out there, and it's not to say, when you say things like that, people say, well, then you want people to die. And you got to get out of the mindset that there's only one way to solve a problem. No one wants to see people die for lack of health care. So if you can't solve that problem through Medicare for all, what other ways do you have to solve it? And it's very possible that in this incoming Congress, it's going to be so narrowly divided in the Senate that not a lot of real robust policies can get passed. What can Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and other Democratic leaders, what can they put out there that would move the ball far along, but also seem reasonable to the average voter? So if Republicans do obstruct, they will be the ones to pay the price and not Democrats. All evidence suggests Medicare for all is not that policy position. And so if Democrats start having an internal civil war over, what's the right healthcare strategy, that's going to harm their ability to have a unified voice. And as we've learned, very, very, very few Democrats said defund the police. But Republicans can play 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Some organization said it, and this organization had a nod to it, and this politician kind of waffled around it, and therefore this politician is on board somehow. They can get away with that if there is a perception that that's what the beating heart of the Democratic Party really wants deep down inside. And if you're a ill-defined down-ballot Democrat, there's a great piece by Daniel Marins over at Huffington Post really digging into what happened down ballot in terms of defund the police. If people don't really know who you are, they're going to believe the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing. It's the candidates who have made a very clear, their own clear persona at home, like a Jared Golden in Maine too. Jared Golden, who even sponsored Medicare for All, but then ran away from it in the general election. Known at home, military vet, speaks the language of his neighbors. That's the kind of candidate that can defy that political gravity. If you don't do that kind of thing, you're gonna have a much tougher time. And so the party as a whole, so if you're on the left, you could say, I understand saying, well, AOC's got to speak the language of her constituents, and Rashid Tlaib has to speak the language of her constituents. Moderates have to accept that they're never going to get the left edge of their party to speak like the moderate edge of their party. There's going to be diversity. There's going to be ideological diversity. It's a big tent. But at the same token, if you're going to be in that big tent and want that big tent to succeed, and you're on the left edge of that, you should put some thought into how can I do right by my own constituents without making things harder for those on the more moderate side of things. You can be very critical of racist police tactics without saying defund the police. That's not the only way to address that issue. And those who were very, very sure that the moderate political strategy was a DOA strategy. Biden's success, Abigail Spanberger's success, Alyssa Slotkin's success in Michigan versus a Kara Eastman's failure and a Mike Siegel's failure in Texas, so on and so forth, that has to disabuse you of that simple pat answer of things. It doesn't mean you got to become moderates all of a sudden. It doesn't mean that every moderate tack is going to work. It's not. There was a fair critique several years ago that Simpson Bowles budget hawkish centrism was thin gruel that wasn't going to impress any voter. That's pretty true. There's no great argument for fiscal austerity as a leading argument. Now, there is an argument that people get a little twitchy when budget numbers run excessively high, but just simply offering the gruel is not a great motivator. So, moderates can't, centrists have that problem. They think anything that you slap a centrist label on automatically means the middle of the road voter is going to like it. That's not true either. But when your theory of the case was tried on a number of levels and did not succeed, it's time to do some critical thinking about how to change your own strategy. And not to give up the whole game, not to say that you have to stop being populist, or if you're a socialist and that's what you want to be, be who you want to be. Be who you are inside. That's a fair thing to do. But you have to make some adjustments if you're going to be part of a big tent party that wins and can get policies done. And sometimes that might mean doing some hard thinking as to things that you assumed were non-negotiables. There's only one way to do X. Well, maybe there's 2 ways, maybe there's 3 ways, maybe there's other ways you can go about it, other policy angles to try that you might find satisfactory. So again, a couple of the questions in the live chat here. What's the decision in the best implementation of the populist left agenda? Honestly, I don't have a great answer to that question. I don't have something at my fingertips, but it's pretty rare to have a city government really be that top to bottom hard left, because I think there's too many pragmatic challenges to getting things done at the municipal level. If other folks out there listening have good examples, please put them in the YouTube thread. I'm sorry that I don't have one at the top of my head. Another question is Black Lives Matter pro Medicare for all. I mean, I don't know if I'm sure there's a lot of overlap. One criticism, there's one Democratic consultant had a comment in an article. I think it was Odio, I believe his last name was, that socialism has really gone beyond just the economic argument, that to the right, to the critic, to the way the Republicans use it, it encapsulates all these other cultural issues like defund the police, like Medicare for all. And I think there are some folks on the social left that actively do tie those things together. I mean, that's what Green New Deal was. It was not just about climate. It was an attempt to kind of take all of those issues and bundle it into one package, which Republicans then use to say, look, they have this whole awful vision of the universe that's going to come crashing down you. It's not just about nice green jobs. So I think technically it's possible to separate those things out, but the right isn't, and there are folks on the left that haven't wanted to. And the other question, what are the best rebuttals? I mean, I think the people that there's sometimes you don't want to be defensive because it draws attention to the issue, but it does seem like those candidates, including Joe Biden, I think Connor Lamb and a few others, that just flat out said, I am against defund the police, just put it flat out there. Those are the ones that had the least amount of problem with it. And that can be tricky because you don't want to alienate your base. You want your base to show up for you. So you can't kick them that hard in the teeth. But some things become too toxic and you have to cleanly and consistently say, this is not me. And I say, how did Max Rose lose? I mean, some people might not have been possible to survive just because of the swing of the district. I mean, Staten Island is just a very conservative place. And it may be nothing he could have done to save himself. And that has to do with just the general national vibe. I think Rose did what he probably could do to separate himself, and it just wasn't enough in that particular district. Not everyone's going to survive that kind of situation. Anyway, I got to jump. Thanks so much for listening to Scherable. Please go to patreon.com/Bill Scher to support this financially. If you want to, and also please subscribe to the YouTube channel so I can keep this going. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.